Hello Clarkston, I'm Rod Rock, and this is Real Learning, where we showcase the excellent teaching and learning that happen each day in the Clarkston Community Schools. Today we have with us Mrs. Megan Braizer, who is a second grade teacher at Pine Knob Elementary School. Welcome, Megan.
Thanks for having me.
Really appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Megan, can you tell us a little bit about your philosophy of teaching and how you arrived at your philosophy?
Yes, of course. You know, my philosophy is based on my experiences and my values. For me, my philosophy has to do with what I deeply believe about children, and I deeply believe that from a very young age, children should be engaged in meaningful learning. I think that children come into this world innately curious, creative, imaginative, passionate, and empathetic, and I think that one of my biggest charges as a teacher is to deepen those skills. I also think that a major role of mine as a teacher is to help children realize the power of their own ideas. Learning is so powerful, and my job is to show them that, that they have that within themselves. And finally, I believe that relationships are at the heart of what I do.
So it's really about kids and getting to know them and your belief in children.
Yep.
It's really, really powerful. So what does that philosophy look like in your classroom?
So in my classroom, you'll find one of the biggest ways that this kind of actualizes in my classroom is engagement. And I think that if you came into my room, you would see kids' noses in books. You would see them sprawled out all over the floor. Because with that engagement comes choice. You would hear them say at the end of the day, I can't believe the day is already over. And so for me, that's one of those moments where I realize, wow, you know, there's this long day that they work hard. And so for them to say it feels like we just got here tells me that there's been a joy in the learning and that they've been deeply engaged. You know, you would also see and hear a lot of conversation. You know, part of relationship building is talking to each other. And so kids in my room will talk in partnerships, they'll talk in small groups, you'll hear them debating ideas, making sense of things together. You'll hear them, you know, arguing about ideas, but in a respectful way. You'll hear them asking questions to each other to kind of clarify one's thinking. And you know, these are 7- and 8-year-olds, and they can do this, and you'll hear those kinds of things in my classroom.
Okay. So you mentioned a few things about how you know kids are learning. What other kinds of things do you observe or hear or document that help you understand that your kids are learning? You
know, I think that the ultimate, of course, is the I got it moments, and I think those, every single time that happens, it's an amazing, you know, it's an amazing moment. But also I'm thinking of just yesterday, there was a little girl who came up to me at the end of the day and she said, I can't wait to go home and tell my dad what a mathematician I am. Now this is a little girl who struggled in math since I've known her, and so for her to say that, not only do I know she's learning, but I also know that she feels powerful as a learner. Another little girl just yesterday said, this is hard, but I just need more time with it. So I know that she's learning. She's using the tools that she has. She's learning perseverance. When kids will say to each other, let me show you a strategy that I'm thinking, well then both kids are learning. I listen for a lot of evidence of that. I listen for in their conversations, are they making claims and providing evidence? I look for that in their written work as well. And I also look for new mistakes, approximations, because to me that's the ultimate sign that they're trying and that they're learning, is that they're going to use but confuse, and so those are really key signs that I look for. One of my favorite phrases that the kids just have naturally come to say is, well, I want to revise my thinking. So again, there are those perfect learning moments that I say, this is learning, this is what it is.
So you talked a little bit about building students' self-esteem and their courage and those dispositions. So how do you know that kids know that you believe in them?
You know, I think that I tell them and I show them. You know, I think common words that you'll hear in our room are, we believe in you. And I say we because it's not just me, it's our community of learners. We believe in each other. You can do this. Maybe you just need more time with it, or you need another strategy, but you can do it, and we're here to help you. You know, I think that giving them, trusting them to make those choices that they do, whether it's choosing a spot or in the way that they showcase their learning. So for example, my students just finished a nonfiction reading unit where they got to choose a topic that they were interested in researching. And at the end of the unit, they got to decide, well, how were they going to present this information to others? So some kids chose clay models, and some kids chose a poster, some kids chose a Google slideshow. And so those choices that I give them in their learning, I think are powerful, and they let them know that I believe that you can show me what you know in a way that makes sense to you. I think it's also noticing when they're feeling a little bit down, noticing the look on their face, or if something isn't going right, pulling them aside and saying, hey, what's going on? In those moments, I think kids know that you see them, you hear them, and you want to know, and then they trust you. They share with you, their feelings, their worries, their hopes, their dreams. And they'll say things like, I'm not sure, but I'm going to keep trying, or I'm not sure about this idea, but here's what I'm thinking so far. They try again even when they fail, and so that's how I know that they know that I believe in them.
Okay, and you mentioned some ways already, but how are some other ways that you know that kids feel powerful in your classroom? When you think about 24, 25, 26 kids and trying to balance all the things you said about community and yet really attend to the individual, how do you know that kids are feeling powerful there?
Well, feeling powerful is one of those big ideas. It's at the heart of my philosophy. And so even at the very beginning of the year, one of the very first questions I ask the students is, what kind of place do we want this to be? And we spend a lot of time at that question. It's not just a 5-minute discussion. It goes on for weeks, and in fact the whole year, because it becomes a foundation of the culture of our classroom. I mean, it becomes our classroom promise that we say to each other. It becomes just this space that we create together. And with that, language, I think, is so powerful in terms of kind of making kids feel powerful. Using those words like we makes it shared, makes it a community. Using words like, well, what makes you say that, or what sense are we making of this? Using those phrases helps them to feel powerful, that this is sense I'm making of this, or we are collectively making of this. It's not me just talking to them about, this is what I want you to learn. It's them making sense of an idea together. I also think that another way that kids in our room feel powerful is because what they have to say, the time and opportunity for them to say it and to listen to each other is valued. I mean, we set aside a lot of time during the day to have partner and group conversations. We have opportunities, multiple opportunities for presentation of ideas, whether it's a single math problem that they're sharing, or it's sharing their salmon projects that they've learned about and that they've become a genius at, and sharing those with other classmates, with other classrooms in the school. So we display a lot of their thinking. They have an opportunity to share their knowledge, which makes them feel powerful and that it's valued. I also think another way that kids feel powerful is choice. And I think that in order to make them feel powerful, they have to have choice in their learning. Little things, again, like where they sit or how they show their knowledge, to bigger things, like what is it that I care about, that I want to study? What is it that I want to spend my next time researching or writing about? What is my opinion about topics, and letting me decide? So I think that's so important.
And we don't always think about how important it is for kids to develop their sense of self as they're going about their learning, and to really trust a 7 or 8 year old like you do, and to manage a classroom and to manage their day to keep kids safe. It's really amazing to think about that amount of trust that you have in kids that helps them develop a sense of self.
It's a process, but it's an important one. I think learning is one of those, things that I think so often people misconstrue as, I teach it, you learn it. And it's not. It's messy, and there's mistakes, and it's a process. And I think we always have to keep that in mind and remember that, and remind kids that too. And they are incredible at persevering through things when we give them the chance.
And so what's one story that exemplifies your belief in children?
So I thought about this, and I feel like there's little stories that come up all the time, but for me there is one that sticks with me, and it's about this little boy named Benny. And Benny came into my classroom having a very difficult first few years. And he came from a rough home life. And in school, he had a hard time engaging academically and even engaging socially. He spent a lot of time kind of wandering around, not really kind of making connections with anything. And so one of my big projects all year long was, okay, I want him to feel connected. I want him to feel a part of our community. And so slowly but surely, it was a process, but he came to the carpet and kind of, talked a little bit, offered some ideas. But there was one day in particular where we were studying, it was time and math, and we were having a discussion on the carpet, and Benny was there, and I had showed the kids a time that a lot of them were confusing. So it was a common misconception. So, I kind of put up the time and I said, what are you thinking? What are you thinking about this time? And Benny raised his hand, and, of course, because he didn't share a lot, I was, very excited, and right away I called on him, and Benny stood up, and he gave the wrong answer. He basically said that misconception that I knew a lot of kids would say. And, all the kids kind of slowly started to say, we have symbols for I agree, I disagree, so they're always engaged. So, their little thumbs went up or down, to kind of show what they were thinking. And as kids came up to kind of explain their thinking, you could see that in the classroom, a lot of kids were realizing the error that Benny had made and that they were making. And so you could see all their little light bulbs going off, and more kids were saying, yeah, no, that's not the right time, except for Benny. Benny stood forward and he said, no, this is the time. And he gave his reasons, and he stood up in front of the class, and he was determined that this was the right time. So this discussion had gone on for about, 7 minutes. And I remember looking up at the time going, okay, we've got to keep going. Maybe he's just not going to get this right now. I'm not sure what to do. There's that pressure that you've got to keep moving. But Benny was up there, and I kind of looked at the class, and I could see in their eyes that they weren't ready to give up yet. You can see they all figured it out, but Benny hadn't. And for some reason, I just knew, just let it go for another minute. And that was hard, but I stepped back and I let it go, and I'm so glad I did, because the very next boy who stood up to explain his thinking to Benny got out a clock, and he showed Benny, the time that Benny was thinking, and he showed him the time that it was, and he explained why it couldn't be that, and he was explaining how the hour and the minute hand worked together, and all of a sudden little Benny said, I get it, I changed my thinking. And then the entire class erupted in a cheer. And so for me, it was just so powerful, because it showed this kid who wasn't engaged previously much, and he just had this moment of perseverance. No, this is it. But then through community and through talk and through conversation, he realized his thinking changed, and everyone supported him. And for me as a teacher, it realized the importance of stepping back and letting go and not worrying so much about time.
Because it would have been really easy to just jump in and save Benny and say, here's the right answer, and move on. But to have that kind of patience, to have him develop that understanding and have his classmates be respectful and empathetic and understanding, that's really...
And want him to get it. It was a true moment of community and just the power of learning together.
Really exemplifies all the things you've said about your philosophy and choice and time, the things that you value. So Megan, if there's one thing you could change about education, what would it be and why?
I've heard a couple of your past guests speak about the narrative in education, and I do agree. I think it's so hard because we're bombarded with these negative messages, and when you look around right here in Clarkson, there's so many wonderful things happening that I do hope that changes. But that being said, as educational leaders, we're always pushing ourselves to move forward, to do better. And so something else that I would love to change, it has to do with time. And by time, I don't mean extending the school day, but I mean reimagining what the school day looks like. Carving out more time for teachers to truly delve into student work, student thinking, and designing richer tasks for them. More time for students to explore their passion projects from a young age, and finding ways to fit the curriculum with their passions instead of the opposite way around. Reimagining how content areas fit together so everything's not so separate. So those are some things that I would like to change.
The ways to think differently about education. Well, Megan, I'm really grateful for you taking the time to be here today. I know it's a different atmosphere than you're used to, and for people to hear about your passion for teaching and the way you engage your children, 7 or 8-year-olds, it's really hard for me to think about that on a day-to-day basis and how difficult that is. to be a teacher when you have all these little people with you and you have a full day, and to engage them and to get to know them and to manage them and to see their growth. It's a remarkable thing in my mind. So I'm really grateful for the work that you do and for your willingness to share. And I'm very appreciative of Megan and all the teachers we have in Clarkston who have this passion, this idea, this philosophy of teaching, and then you can walk into their room and you can see it and you can feel it. And there are excellent things that happen every single day in the Clarkston Community Schools. I believe it's one of the finest school districts in the world. It's because of people like Megan who do such a great job that that's the case. So thank you for tuning in, and I hope you have a great day.